want this thing. They have a timeline. This timeline has kicked in. And with the incidents now that are rising, when we're talking about moving 31 or 36 nuclear fighters into Cuba, we're talking about something that hasn't been seen since the Cuban Missile Crisis. When we're talking about I actually had three different families talk about watching U.S. jets intercept a Russian MiG-31 over New Hampshire. And by the way, one of my listeners sent me a silhouette link site so people could tell what type of airplanes, in the military, how they teach you to look up in the sky and see by the silhouette what type of an airplane it is.
Right.
And these different individuals, families, watched two of our fighters fire on this MiG. Well, where does a Russian MiG come into U.S. airspace over New Hampshire?
And not get noticed by us, the media.
Not get noticed. Now, the Russians have a plasma stealth, okay? As you know,
Explain that.
And a plasma stealth basically is an electrical field that they generate. They generate a field that absorbs the radar or the incoming, in other words, the electronic countermeasures that are aimed against it. So there's nothing to bounce off of. You follow? So in essence, when on a flight control system or a fire control system, they have an ability it's equal kind of to our stealth technology, but according to the Russians, who knows, they claim that it's better than ours. The idea is that they have a technology come in undetected, and a plasma stealth system, it's like if you will, a force field that absorbs any energy that's directed against it, so there's no feedback, bounce back, so our systems can't pick it up.
Okay, Stephen, well, you wanted to talk a little bit about China.
Right.
Let's get into that area, too, because where do they stand?
Well, right now, China's made their intentions. First of all, they're our biggest creditor right now. We owe China an immense amount of money in our balance of trade, plus they have up to $1.4 trillion. People should watch where Hank Paulson, the Secretary of the Treasury, goes. The idea is that the Chinese and Russians have both let it be known, George, in the last probably 96 hours, that they will not go willingly to watch a failure of Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. In other words, they are holding a tremendous amount of U.S. paper. It used to be the idea was to get rid of U.S. dollars. China actually started buying U.S. dollars last week, and as you saw, the U.S. dollar went to, quote, unusual highs from unusual lows. So the idea of China knows this, that everybody in the world realizes that the United States has been behind the New World Order. But years ago, both the Russians and Chinese met together a number of years ago and said they're not going to allow the United States hegemony or the New World Order to take place on the U.S.'s terms. And so now you've got China and Russia both telling the United States that we are, meaning Russia and China, we're not going to sit by and basically let you take the parts of the world you want. We're going to challenge you. Now, where that comes into being also is, if you remember the story about, obviously, China taking down our spy plane, getting a lot of our technology, and contrary to popular belief, it was not destroyed like it was supposed to be. The Russians and the Chinese both squaring off with our Navy in the Pacific Ocean. The voluminous amount of money that China is pouring into high-energy weapons, the amount of money that basically China is devoting to upgrading its military. And you see, the thing is that they're both doing it from a surplus. China's got the largest economy in the world and the fastest-growing economy in the world. And what people don't understand is the globalists are going to take the Americans, which were a lot of the United States now is credit broke. If consumer spending is responsible for 70% of the U.S. economy, then what happens when there is no consumer spending? I got news for you. A $600 rebate doesn't go very far, very long.
Not at all.
So now what's happening is the globalists are building up China. There are more billionaires in China, I think, made weekly than there are in the United States made yearly. And the thing is that they're going to sell China on the, quote, American dream of credit. And so instead of having, I don't know what they'll call them over there, Visa cards, maybe they'll call them Szechuan cards, and I'm not being cynical. I'm just saying that now, instead of having a nation of a couple 100 million consumers, you have a nation of 1.2 billion consumers.
And they can afford things.
And as they get more wealthy, they demand more food, they demand more grains, they demand more oil.
And where are they going to get that?
Where are they going to get it? Well, they're going to get it from wherever they can get it. And China, this is something people need to understand. The history of the world is fascinating. The Chinese are responsible for so many of our inventions, not only gunpowder, of course, but when you look at the idea of China's history, these are incredibly brilliant and industrious people. And so
they have patience.
And they have patience. Very good. What do we have? We have the instant this or that mentality that if we can't kick the machine to get the Coke instantly, we'll tear the Coke machine door off and then find out to our dismay that there's no Coke in the machine. We didn't take the time to look through the little glass to see there was nothing in the rack. And then if you add India into the equation, then you see where India and Pakistan are getting ready to square off. And Pakistan is interesting because when this thing breaks out in the Middle East, Pakistan will be involved. Pakistan has exported nuclear warheads, nuclear technology. Dr. Khan has basically been the Santa Claus to the nations who could pay. And this is something where America's naivety, the human intelligence network that was formerly in the CIA and a lot of the military, that was pretty much destroyed under Bill Clinton's reign. It's not a political statement. It happens to be, everyone who's been in the CIA or DIA.
It's true.
It's true. And so the thing is that all of the technology that we possess that was unique to us, whether it was our satellite technology, our guidance systems, that was, quote, either given or sold to the Chinese or betrayed to the Chinese during the Clinton reign, some of the great spy cases.
Are there people on this planet who would accept a population of 500 million people with 75% of the planet annihilated by nuclear war?
Yes. Those are the people that are going to make sure it comes, because remember, those are what are called the useless eaters. And I say, remember, to them, anybody other than them are useless eaters.
So they've got their bunkers, they've got their hidden homes, and they're ready.
Yep. And fascinating that, just to let you know, I talked to a builder. Montana has some of the, we have a lot of incredibly condensed areas where a lot of people are moving to. It's called the last best place,
Right.
And I asked the guy, he doesn't tell me names, I don't ask names, but he said, Steve, you'd be amazed of how many places, this man only builds houses that are in the $5 to $10 million range. He said, I said to him, how many of those houses are you putting in bunkers, He said, all of them. Now, that's fascinating, George.
All of them.
All of them. And, this is like who's who in the world lives at some areas of Montana.
What's happening with Hugo Chavez? He's pretty quiet lately.
Well, actually, he's making a lot of noise in the acquiring Russian weaponry is by the tunes of the billions. And remember, he's now made the statement. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the most critical areas in the world for our well-being when it comes to oil is the Caribbean. Most people don't realize the Dutch Antilles Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, especially Aruba, is very critical to the offloading of the super ships because they're deep water ports. And we've been picking up a lot of information of the Dutch and NATO. And if you know and have been watching, again now, the U.S. military is putting a Navy contingency in the Caribbean. Well, we're encountering a lot of Russians in the Caribbean, and one of the concerns is, and I was told this by a former Venezuelan oil minister, that when things get hot and everything goes to war, that the oil facilities in Aruba come into grip. And by the way, this is something very few people knew about until we started talking about this stuff, okay? And when I sat down with this gentleman who speaks better English than I speak Spanish, I speak no Spanish, very little. The point is, he said, you must tell your listeners, Steve, that this is the choke point, the entire North American continent.
And in the Navy, you have to have choke points to win.
Yep. And so the thing is that Chavez is basically shifting a lot of his oil to China. And it's kind of like, how do I say this? It's kind of like the quintessential weapons bazaar where Chavez has got a lot of money, okay? And obviously he's mad, and rightly so. If someone was going to try and kill you, and you're being told through the